need to be protected.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday stressed the need to protect innocent civilians in Gaza after scores of Palestinians were killed in the southern city of Rafah during an Israeli military operation that freed 2 hostages held by Hamas. The speech alongside Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House comes as Biden has become increasingly vocal in his demand that Israel not undertake a ground offensive in Rafah without a plan that protects Palestinian civilians.
Major military operation in Rafah should not proceed without a credible plan for ensuring the safety and support of more than 1 million people sheltering there. Many people there have been displaced multiple times, fleeing the violence to the north, and now they're packed into Rafah.
Biden, who has shown increasing exasperation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for not heeding his advice, said he and allies in the region were working, quote, day and night on a deal to pause fighting, allow hostages to be freed, and increase the flow of humanitarian assistance to Gaza.
The United States is working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which would bring an immediate and sustained period of calm to Gaza for at least 6 weeks.
Sources familiar with the talks told Reuters that senior officials from the U.S., Egypt, Israel, and Qatar were expected to resume negotiations on Tuesday in Cairo to work on a 3-phase deal framework to release hostages and achieve an extended pause.
We are still focused on trying to get an extended humanitarian pause.
White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby told reporters that some progress had been made in negotiations toward a pause in fighting, but that more work was still needed to be done. The intensifying conflict in Rafah fueled concerns that an Israeli offensive on the southernmost pocket of Gaza could derail the hostage talks, but a U.S. official told Reuters the airstrikes in Rafah should not affect the negotiations toward a deal between Israel and Hamas on the release of hostages.
It is not our assessment that this airstrike is the launch of a full-scale offensive.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said the U.S. did not think the Israeli airstrikes in Rafah were the start of a full-scale military operation in the southern Gaza city, and that without a credible plan that Israel can execute, Washington would not support one.
Good afternoon. Too many of the over 27,000 Palestinians killed in this conflict have been innocent civilians and children, including thousands of children, including schools, playgrounds, and neighborhoods. We're actively working for peace, security, and dignity for both the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. And I'm working on this day and night. No access to food, water, or other basic services. As the King and I discussed today, the United States is working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which would bring an immediate and sustained period of calm to Gaza for at least 6 weeks, which we could then take the time to build something more enduring. We will keep working to complete what we started. The King and I also discussed the situation in Rafah. As I said yesterday, our military operation in Rafah, the major military operation in Rafah, should not proceed without a credible plan for ensuring the safety and support of more than 1 million people sheltering there. Many people there have been displaced multiple times, fleeing the violence to the north, and now they're packed into Rafah, exposed and vulnerable. They need to be protected. No one understands better than our allies and partners in the region. The U.S. military forces have struck targets in Iraq and Syria, and our response will continue. We're grateful to our partners and allies like the King, who work with us every single day to advance security and stability across the region and beyond.
Mr. President, the situation is already unbearable for over 1 million people who have been pushed into Rafah since the war started. We cannot stand by and let this continue. We need a lasting ceasefire now. This war must end. Continues to unfold in Gaza as we speak. Restrictions on vital relief aid and medical items are leading to inhumane conditions. No other UN agency can do what UNRWA is doing in helping the people of Gaza through this humanitarian catastrophe. Its work in other areas of operation, especially in Jordan, where 2.3 million are registered, is also vital. It is imperative that UNRWA continues to receive the support it needs to carry out its mandate. To ensure the sustainable delivery of sufficient aid to Gaza, we must not ignore the situation in the West Bank and in the holy sites in Jerusalem. Nearly 400 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th, including almost 100 children and over 4,000 injured. Continued escalations by extremist settlers in the West Bank and Jerusalem's holy sites and the expansion of illegal settlements will unleash chaos on the entire region. Since October 7th, are never repeated nor accepted. It is also important to stress that the separation of the West Bank and Gaza cannot be accepted. 7 decades of occupation, death, and destruction have proven beyond any doubt that there can be no peace without a political horizon. Military and security solutions are not the answer.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to express how pleased we are to hear the news of 2 Israeli hostages freed last night by Israeli Defense Forces in Rafah. After 128 days, Fernando Simon Marion and Louis Har are now reunited with their families where they belong. That's where all the hostages belong, quite frankly. Now, I've also seen reports that civilians were killed over the weekend in Rafah due to Israeli operations. I can't confirm those reports, but as we have said many times, the proper number of civilian casualties is 0. We don't want to see a single innocent civilian death, Israeli or Palestinian. But let me be clear, there can be no enduring end to this crisis until Hamas releases the men and women that they are holding hostage, all of them. We don't believe that it's advisable to go in a major way in Rafah without a proper, executable, effective, and credible plan for the safety of the more than 1 million Palestinians that are taking refuge in Rafah. They've left the north, and they certainly went south out of Khan Yunis to try to get out of the fighting. So Israel has an obligation to make sure that they can protect them. We don't want to see any forced relocation of people out of Gaza. That's home for the Palestinian people. Well, again, that's something that we have and will continue to discuss with counterparts in the region, but it's home to those folks. That's Gaza's home. And they shouldn't be forced to leave Gaza if they don't want to leave. Now, if there's going to be operations in Rafah or around Rafah, the Israelis have a commitment, an obligation to make sure that they can provide for the safety of innocent Palestinian people that are there. We haven't changed in terms of our desire to see an extended pause so that we can get all the hostages home with their families where they belong, so we can get additional security assistance in, and we can see a reduction in the violence. We are still focused on trying to get an extended humanitarian pause.
I'm asking about a permanent pause.
I know what you're asking. What I'm saying is we support and continue to support an extended humanitarian pause. We sadly don't have a whole lot of specific information about where each of the hostages are, who's holding them, and in what condition they might be. And sadly, we have to accept the possibility that some of them are no longer alive. We just don't have terrific granularity on that.
A potential full-fledged military incursion into Rafah, where some 1.5 million Palestinians are packed against the Egyptian border with nowhere further to flee, is terrifying. An extremely high number of civilians, mostly women and children, will likely be killed or injured. We have warned against actions violating the laws of war. The prospect of such an operation into Rafah risks further atrocity crimes. The world must not allow this to happen. Those with influence must restrain rather than enable. There must be an immediate ceasefire. All remaining hostages must be released, and there must be renewed collective resolve to reach a political solution.